I'm Spencer, and this is Real Television, and I wanted to talk about why I'm doing these videos. It's very important to get this message across as tactfully as I can, because what ended up happening is last night I was watching people react to Wicked, the first part, and how people were crying at the end, and a lot of them would say, why am I crying? You know, like, they understand part of it. They understand the feeling of being mistreated for no reason, or at least no good reason. They understand the feeling of being ostracized. They understand the feeling of otherness, because they've seen it and they've experienced it, depending on the person, of course. Not everybody has experienced that on either end. But I wanted to write something that kind of talked about the main reason why I feel like Spirit has guided me to talk about this stuff. And I didn't want to make it too long, but if you really want to know how to change the world, I guess you could say that, or at least your own world, and give other people a chance to change theirs, you'll listen to this video, and you'll listen to the rest of them. If you're on TikTok or Instagram Reels, you'll look at every part of this video, because on Instagram and TikTok I have to split them up. If you want the full version without any edits or having to click on other videos, go ahead and go to the YouTube version and you'll see it there. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just start reading what I was able to write out this morning, and it took me literally like less than 30 minutes to write because it was so clear. But yeah, sit back and enjoy, and tell me the good news in the comments. I was contemplating Wicked last night, like I said, and how her journey relates to my own, and how the movie is pretty political in one aspect of it during the whole thing, at least very pointedly. Granted, the whole thing is pretty political, but I personally resonate so much with that story of Elphaba and being ostracized. Spirit has been trying to work me up to this point so that I could see the power of this prism vision, as I've mentioned I have. I was browsing YouTube last night, which is how this started. I saw a video titled, "What It Looks Like When Someone is Actively Dying," and I didn't click on it because I was not interested. And it made me think of the situation that is currently happening with Trump and how there's rumors that he's actually very ill. I thought nothing of it until I watched a rug cleaning video, which is so random, I know, but it's funny because the way that they were cleaning it was not the usual way that they do, which is they just put a bunch of water on it, scrub it away, and then use the, machine that scrubs it, that they have to put it in circles or whatever. It was literally, they just sprinkled some of the soap and then they put something on it that activated it and made it foam up. That was their cleaning method, and it said on the video that it was a new cleaning method. It made me think as I watched it foam up and expand and cover the whole rug entirely. It reminded me of some of the community readings that I came across that I resonated with on a personal level, where some people mentioned a mushroom cloud or expanding golden light, or a golden light that covered an entire place. It reminded me of Wicked and how she finds out that the wizard has no real power, and that he needed her to do whatever he was planning to do. The fact that if I hadn't healed, this information would not exist. My story connects with everyone else's in this way. Now, I'm not more important than anyone else, but that is how important this information is, in my opinion. The fact that Elphaba was brave enough to call him out on his bullshit and do something about it is how she actively takes her power. She takes the Grimoire and runs. She takes her power back, and because she's the only one that can read it. She's representing everyone and how we are actively letting this happen because we haven't healed and we haven't realized that we can actually do something about it. I'll show you why. Being a minority gives you certain powers, kind of like Elphaba. It doesn't feel like a power at first, but it feels like you have to watch your back. You have to really find out if someone supports you or not based on how they act. And we have to anticipate what that reaction might be and plan accordingly. We have to learn to have eyes and ears everywhere because we need to do that to survive. But minorities like me in the trans community have been severely misunderstood simply because someone says we are and people believe them without doing any research or talking to a trans person. Even though there's scientific evidence that we aren't any different from anyone else, save the fact that we feel this need to present as the other gender because we are comfortable that way. We're happy that way. We operate from a place of love, integrity, and truth. At least I do, and I'm sure a lot of people might agree with that those things are good things to lead your life by. But for some reason that stops when we get to politics. I was thinking about my own family and how they support the one sitting in that office right now, and how they are kind people, but outside of that, they've been conditioned to agree with what they are doing to a point. They are cunningly controlling their emotions, the people in the office. The way they harness that pathos, ethos, and logos persuasion techniques is mind-boggling to me. Despite all of this, I know that we're being manipulated, and I'm telling you why and what to do about it. I believe I've figured out the weakness to all of this and how we can pull ourselves out of this. But I need you guys to help me do it. I need you guys to share this video so that people can get this information. First, since Wicked is a good representation of authoritarianism because of the animals, this is representative of actual dehumanization. That's what people on the other end of the spectrum of love and light think of people who have been told to hate certain people for no apparent logical reason. That's why stories are so potent. They are basically hieroglyphs of the times that we're in. So when people write dystopian novels like I am now, it's because something in the current structure of society is that way. If you take a look at history or the history of literature, stories were always written in times that reflected what was going on during that time. Literature often serves as a mirror of its time, reflecting the social, political, and cultural movements that shaped its creation. What I'm attempting to do now is show that emotions through story are connected, and when these stories reflect the current climate of the world, these stories can show us how each of these reactions has led to this point. They are all connected through the human experience of life. I'm simply exploring them through universal archetypes like corruption, greed, awakening, justice, and love, which is the major arcana, if you think about it, like the devil, or the Seven of Swords, or the world, or the Justice card, or the Lover's card. That's what they represent. We have the opportunity to use these stories and finally see the truth for what it is. Movies are a creative way that we see the world. It allows for artistic interpretation, which is the most important aspect of all. For example, the most recent movie breakdown I did was for Spirited Away. No Face represents greed in a capitalistic environment, whereas the animals in Wicked represent dehumanization and authoritarianism, which is why in my own book I am using technology to turn people into basically living berserkers from the legends of Vikings, but for the modern age. That's symbolism. That's saying that we are going through that as minorities, but in a modern era with the use of social media, with the click of a button, as I say in the book. The only people that we've been told to hate are our neighbors, our children, our siblings, and our parents. Just like Oz says, where I come from, everyone knows that in order to bring people together, you gotta give them a real good enemy. And when that enemy is someone you know, it makes it harder for you to break free, which is what happens in my book as well. That's why I say that spells are words. When someone says something about someone else at large enough a scale, when twisted just enough to cause fear, it's exactly like the Wizard of Oz when he says that. He knows that the animals aren't actually a problem. He's just using them to try and create peace when there was already peace to begin with. There's always going to be a problem when the current power structures are working so hard to separate us. The good enemy in this case is the people around us. Like I said, that we are all somehow dangerous to each other and that we can't let each other get too close or they'll hurt us. Emotionally, physically, psychologically, whatever it is. That's how bad it's gotten. That's why we're in the predicament that we are right now, politically. But in order to fix it, we have to see ourselves in each other. We have to see that stories come from what someone else has either seen or witnessed, and they wanted to get the message out in a way that people understood it. That's why storytelling is so powerful. A fun way to get serious messages out when done correctly and with heart. With that being said, this next part is very important, so please pay attention. In order to control people, we have to have a system that is so full of fear that we don't question it. So if you think of political parties as people or two kaijus or whatever you want to label them, it's basically a scale of how diverse that country is, at least in my mind. How much we have connected or not. With a two-party system, we are at the lowest of the low when it comes to how much we have separated from each other. Other countries still have their problems, but the ones with more political parties tend to have less of them compared to us. The way that we are controlled is through that fear. The more they implement fear with the right intention, the more control they have. Fear is like a fog. It lasts longer. They spark anger in some people because that's what they're doing on purpose. They want those short bursts of control through fear because we act as our own quartermasters when that happens. kind of like the people in the Prince of Egypt when they're whipping people, except it would be one of our own doing it. The Egyptians wouldn't need to do anything themselves in this case, if you think about today's logic. The fear is making us dull our senses and go into survival mode. That's why we are all begging for scraps and being breadcrumbed so bad. You catch yourself saying, oh, at least I have a job. Or, oh, good, I got rent paid, but barely. At least I get a place to live. You see how ridiculous that sounds now, right? We have become emotionally numb to what is going on because we are so afraid that the other shoe will drop. That we can't get out of our circumstances because of bills to pay and the fear of being homeless next week. We all live paycheck to paycheck, and we're one paycheck away from being homeless. That is pure survival mode. We are the animals being controlled here. We are worried that someone will take our dens away from us because we made so much effort to make our lives better that we're afraid that we won't be able to make it last. Why don't we take that money that we use every day and start helping each other instead? Getting to know our neighbors and asking if there's anything that we can do to help here and there. Getting to know your neighbors even if they're gay or trans. Getting to know your Mexican neighbors or talking with your family members that are anything other than what you are comfortable with. That's how they get us. They get us by making each other have preconceived notions of each other so that when the fear is low enough, we won't do anything to stop it. Just like when Dr. Dillamond is taken in front of all of those students. None of them do anything except Elphaba. She has harnessed her emotions. She realizes that her emotions are the key to her power. That's why I kept mentioning that these things like emotions and creative things are tools. They are the way to get out of this. You just have to be brave enough to face those fears that we have of each other. Those fears that we were told to have, or those prejudices, or those preconceived notions, whatever you want to call it. Even in stories, emotions have always been the amplifiers of energies, like the Force in Star Wars, and why we always side with the rebels, and that we love villains or anti-heroes so much. They are all the truth about life. The way that we live now is not the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be living happy and content lives, but we've decided that money is more important than people, which is yet another thing I went over in my previous video in regard to the character No Face. When you focus emotion with intention, it acts like electricity through a circuit, powering whatever signal you're putting out. Like a beehive. When you're relocating a hive of bees, the beekeeper finds the queen and then moves her to the new crate. When this happens, the worker bees start fanning their wings and lifting their booties up in the air, telling all the other ones where to go. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here, signaling you to where we need to go. Why do you think that people are being told that, quote, empathy is a sin now? The more that we ignore our feelings, the more control they have over us. The more that we rely on ourselves rather than each other, the more people they take. Now, when we decide to heal and start to understand the world around us, especially through story, and seeing ourselves in them, that amplifies our frequency with the field around you. It helps your body, your heart, your brain, and your nervous system sync up. Think about that at a large scale. Right now, it's in their favor, but as soon as we start supporting each other, that makes the scales of justice tip back in our favor hard. There's only a handful of people running things, and hundreds of thousands of us. It's like that scene in A Bug's Life where Hopper is telling the other grasshoppers about what happens when one ant stands up versus all of them, and that they can't remember that, or they are outnumbered. I'm not saying let's start a physical revolution, but what I am saying is that the way that we get over this and through this is with removing our energy from it entirely on both ends and refuse to do anything until they get their act together. That will remind them of who is really in charge. We become the sleeping dragon in a cave that's woken up. We make them the knight that foolishly thought that they could end us. We use the silver against them that they were using against us to keep us in our human forms. Not literally, but if you think about werewolves and the wild nature that they have when they are transformed and how we are fearful of them, it makes sense. We have been taught that our wild nature of happiness and love is wrong. We've been made to be afraid of the fire, just like the Hound in Game of Thrones. We've experienced being burned before collectively, and when it's done in a way that pushes us all into the same corner, we feel powerless. Now, if you believe in spirituality or not, that isn't the point. The point is that no matter what you believe, this stuff is real. There's a spider. I got distracted. Anyway, it can be scientifically proven that when there's not enough support, like an immune system, viruses can more easily get in. Or a computer, when you download something with viruses, the computer no longer works correctly. We just have to be brave enough to step through that portal from one life to the other. The life that we don't desire and the one that we do, together. I can't do it myself. I'm only one person. We've heard ourselves say that at one point or another, I'm sure. But if we do this together, this would change overnight if we wanted it to. The option has always been there. That's why these stories are so important. They are portals into the ether of what it means to remember again. This is how spirit talks to us. They speak to us through creativity, through puzzles. That's why I've been guided to name my channel what I named it, because if you see the story for what it truly is, it becomes a tool and a guide for both yourself and the world, because you see yourself in it. And you see that everyone else has experienced this at one point or another, most likely. We all know what it's like to survive. So why not take inspired action and thrive? If we all decide that we want better for ourselves and our country, we have to get out of this liminal space that we're in, where emotions are not important but money is. People aren't important but money is. We have to throw a grappling hook to the other end of the other portal in that liminal space and hook it onto something tangible on the other end. In this case, a better country. The grappling hook would act as an active choice to the change. It depends on both your intention and your will. You have to have enough faith that it will work out at some point. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to face your fear. You have to be willing to treat people better because you see them as human too. You have to have the adaptability to get yourself there mentally. Now, if you do that, the momentum will build if you stop doubting or hesitating. Faith and clarity speed it up. So the more that you are open to learning new things and changing your behavior, even if it's in a small way at first, can mean the difference between keeping this going and finally ending it and creating a world that is actually going to benefit all of us, instead of benefiting off of the suffering of others because you've been told that that's the truth or the way to peace. Grappling hooks are used in adventure stories when the hero is facing impossible feats. The hook isn't just a tool, it's a symbol of trust in unseen anchors. Symbolically, if you think about the whole movie Wicked, it's in two parts. That in itself, while probably intentional so that they could get the message across and have a fantastically detailed movie, it's also symbolic of having one world and ending up in another. The world where there's harmony for the most part, to a world where one type of person or persons is vilified to the point that a whole system has targeted them simply because they want something better for everyone, including themselves, including those who are at the heart of that attack. Minorities. Just like how Elphaba is targeted just because she has green skin. Exactly like what's happening now with ICE detaining brown people, black and brown people. They're simply being detained because of the color of their skin. While they don't have green skin, they are being detained and vilified for the exact same reasons as Elphaba, but it's in the real world. And I will say, and I'll take the time to say this, the same thing is happening in Palestine. Exactly the same as Elphaba, just at a larger scale and a more violent scale. The people in power have made us throw our grappling hooks backwards because we have been made to fear the unknown. When the opportunity for clarity has passed you on the street, or on the way to work, or even sitting next to you at lunch. That's why when Elphaba dances with Galinda at the dance, she cries because she finally is feeling seen, and she's being shown love. She's being told that she is worthy of being treated like an actual human being, despite what Galinda did before all of that to get it to that point. She realized the error of what she was doing. She saw a part of herself in her, even though she would never actually admit it. The wizard's power is all about smoke and mirrors. It's all about creating fear and maintaining control of us and the narrative. His whole power is built on illusion of choice, smoke and mirrors and propaganda, just like authoritarian systems that we see in real life. When Elphaba exposes that, she becomes a threat to the system. Labeling her wicked or a witch is their way of silencing her and turning the people against her, which is what's happening with trans people right now. Trans people have been vilified as pedophiles or groomers because that's what people tend to hate the most. People hurting their children. That's the worst thing that someone could possibly do, and yet the only thing different is that we don't feel like what we are born as. And that's become some kind of crime, apparently. Whereas we've made it okay to have one sitting in the Oval Office. You see how they turn that against us and sit back and let us squabble? They don't even have to do anything to keep us in line anymore. We fall for it every time because we refuse to heal, and we blame all our problems on others rather than looking in and seeing what we've personally done that might actually be the cause of it. We all affect each other. If one person decides that a certain type of person is a problem and they make a good enough of an argument, other people start to agree blindly. They just believe it because they make it sound so bad that why would someone even question it? They are using your emotions against you. Plain and simple. That's what happened when I decided to come out as a trans man. I went against everything that the system has taught us, that there's only male and female and you can't change it. But science has shown that that is not the case entirely. We've gotten to the point that it feels better to deny the truth than to actually learn the truth. It feels safer. As a trans person, I love people. I think people are fascinating, and I've learned a lot from these stories. I've also learned that being willing to go outside the bounds of those stories is how we heal. When I came out, I went through that fear of, what if people don't understand me? What if they mock me? What if somebody kills me because of this? I did it anyway, because that was ultimately something that helped me be happy. That's the exact energy Elphaba embodies, the born this way energy. That energy of knowing that even though I'm different, that doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of love, because at the end of the day, I'm still human, even though certain people would rather see me as a threat when I've done nothing wrong. We've been conditioned to feel like conformity is safety. Authoritarian control thrives on silencing dissent in any way it can, through politics, economics, and even art and music. Wicked is the mythic version of that pattern. I would recommend watching that movie with that particular lens and dissect it yourself so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But for the sake of this video, I wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty details and focus less on the movie itself and more on this particular important lesson. That's why I was guided to watch these particular movies in this particular order of the videos that I've done already, because that's how I see the world. It will be different for other people most likely, but watch my other videos first to see what I'm talking about. You'll see that I've healed it bit by bit and my empathy has grown. My understanding has grown bit by bit on how to connect to that energy of what I want. We actually take the time to understand each other rather than blatantly believing a lie at the drop of a hat. I wanted to talk about Wicked because talking about misunderstood characters like Elphaba gives people permission to ask themselves, what systems are we letting tell us who is good and who is bad without questioning the illusion itself? The scene where they take Dr. Dillamond is something I wanted to focus on here. It shows action being taken to take someone out of the picture, literally. Those emotions of hate are strong. Love is also strong. But hate has a weight to it that makes it difficult to get out from underneath it. Hate is something that is very close to pride. It thrives off of that. It thrives as its own echo chamber of sorts. It tells you that you are never wrong. You're right to be pissed at this information because it's so heinous. At least that's what you've been told. If we as trans people are so bad, take the time to actually watch a few videos without commenting when something makes you upset. Try to see the experiences that you see in your own life through their stories. You'll see that they are human too. That nearly every trans person, or every minority for that matter, has the same experiences as you. So why are we treating ourselves this way? Because someone out there benefits from us not realizing our power. Just like how the wizard and Madame Morrible were hoping that Elphaba would be so happy to be there in the Emerald City that she would be willing to do anything to stay there, because she saw herself as less than human, her green skin. They saw that she could be vulnerable to that at first, until she accepted herself and thought of the happiness of others and how she had the power to help them in any way she could by asking for help. When you are willing to ask for help, that's when you are open to change. That's when things will actually start changing bit by bit. Curiosity will help keep you open to new information, new changes in your mind that you actually want instead of what you've been taught. You have to detach yourself every now and then and examine your thoughts and ask, what is this emotion? What is this that I'm feeling? Just like they do in the movie with the song, What Is This Feeling? You have to control your feelings, just like a Jedi or just like a witch. If you move through curiosity, you grow. When you move through fear, you stagnate or try to control everything else because you're so out of touch with yourself and everyone around you. Emotional discernment is self-mastery. Curiosity is you controlling your emotions. That is the difference between Elphaba and the wizard. She channels her emotions into her power, whereas he channels fear and manipulates emotions with illusion with his gadgets and puppet face when Elphaba meets him at first. You have to remember that fear is a teacher. You have to discern the difference between hate and love. So what you can do is look at it like this. Dehumanization is showing the sickness of that power. Fear is the emotion that power uses to sustain itself. Curiosity and discernment is the key to breaking free. My videos aren't just cool metaphors. They are training people to see the mechanisms of power and healing in stories in your own lives. When you're taught to just be entertained rather than think and remember the past, you don't see the messages in the stories. You sit there and think, it's just a story. Propaganda relies on exactly that dismissal. If people believe fiction is harmless, they won't ask why it resonates so deeply. That's like when people cry at the end of Wicked or Mufasa, even though they might not like those stories. Of course, depending on the person. They are confused as to why they are crying, which is totally understandable given the circumstances. It resonates with you on a soul level, a level that sees you. It's trying to wake you from this stupor that we've let happen to ourselves by believing a lie. Every story carries a message, whether they wanted it to have one or not. A story reflects the culture that birthed it. That's why myths, fairy tales, and now movies can tell us what society fears and what it values. So another way that we're controlled is through comfort. We've been being numbed by negativity, but we are also pacified through comfort, through stories. We have become the capital in the Hunger Games. We have become the Empire in Star Wars. We have become the wizard in Wicked. Collectively, we've agreed that it's safer to be the enemy than the rebel. Both of these lead to inaction, stagnation and inaction. We need to start sharing our stories online without fear. We need to realize someone else's hate is just a symptom of a bigger problem, bigger than anyone could have realized without some serious divine intervention. When we have our grappling hooks on the same anchor point, which is true peace and understanding, our faith is our momentum. Faith in each other and ourselves that we can do this. That's why Galinda helps Elphaba in the end and even gives her a cloak, because she's realizing that this is bigger than both of them and she needs to do her part because she has front row seats to the issue now. That's why she is shown at the beginning telling the Munchkins that she used to know Elphaba and starts explaining how that is in an attempt for cultivating understanding and curiosity. She's trying to show the Munchkins another side to the story, but they're so busy hating and angry to see it or even be open to seeing it, which is exactly how the wizard keeps his power. We call emotional control mastery because when we don't suppress our emotions, you don't let them dictate your life, and you understand them, integrate them, and move through them with awareness, you are literally making informed decisions on what to do next. What would be the best for you, and what would be best overall for other people? Because we are all connected. Our choices affect others. Just like if someone decides to drive drunk one night and then gets into an accident and kills someone. They have now affected a family with grief, and maybe the grief is so bad that the husband and wife, or partners, whatever you prefer, whatever the case, they start to misunderstand each other more and more because they're too focused on their own emotions and are literally drowning emotionally. Then they get a divorce. That's the worst case scenario on all fronts in that case, but you get the example that I'm trying to go for here. With this in mind, this ties in with my life as well, because I wanted to be a biologist at first when I was a kid. I enjoyed science. I was really good at it, actually. But growing up and watching Nightmare Before Christmas, where Jack is putting these items in beakers and opening the teddy bear, trying to understand something so different to his own world, is just yet another example of what we've been trying to get ourselves to do for so long. To understand things that are different from us and how life actually is supposed to work. It took my whole life to get to this point of understanding, though. I had to get extremely creative with it sometimes. But it was 100% worth the effort, because I realized the weight of what I'm saying could, quite literally, change the world if other people knew it. Not instantaneously, necessarily, but it could if we wanted it to, eventually. We could all just need to decide on a day to implement it and then follow through. Then we can start asking ourselves the questions about what would be better for all of us and start making those changes. That's why I keep using kaleidoscopes and prisms as a metaphor. Once you hold one and twist it, the pattern is there. The answer is there. I'm giving you instructions on how to hold and turn the scope. I'm giving you a guide on how to change, how to understand each other again, how to connect again. and what happens when we finally remember who we are. That's why I've been giving you these homework sections in all of these videos, because I want you to see similar stories and specific areas in those stories that line up with what I'm saying. The universal truths are there. You have to look at those scenes and ask yourself, what is the universal theme here? What fear, lesson, or transformation is it mirroring to me? Then you have to look at that pattern, ask yourself, what is the through line? For example, Jumanji, there's a scene where they compare strengths and weaknesses. That's self-mastery. That's showing where you need help and that you're willing to ask for that. Baldur's Gate 3, choosing truth over servitude, is spiritual liberation. That's like literally saying, I'm not going to become a mind flayer because I love my life the way it is. That kind of thing. The more you see the truth, the more you see yourself, and the more you see yourself, the more you see it in yourself, the more you see yourself in others. That brings me to memes. I know, it might not feel like it's connected, but it is. Trust me, just give me a second. We've found a way to do this, but in shorthand form already, through memes. We find an image or a scene from a movie and we insert text on top that matches the energy of that expression or scene, and we laugh. Because we all know deep down that these systems are jokes. That's why certain systems get mad and make laws about not allowing certain people to be made into memes. They're afraid we'll realize the truth. They act as an emotional hieroglyph, snippets of what the collective understands about each other at the moment, which is unfortunately not much yet. But it will grow if you implement this. That's why I believe I was guided to design the channel the way I did. Using the word reel, R-E-E-L, is referring to movies, obviously, but television is having the vision to see through the stories on the television. Changing the frequency, just like old televisions used to rely on, which is why Spirit guided me to make it feel more nostalgic than anything else. Spirit asked me to use movies as portals to understanding. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about here that I'm still wrapping my mind around is the fact that in spiritual circles, they say that dragons are real, but that they are just higher dimensional beings. I believe that the white dragon in my branding is actually me, but in the higher realms. That's why they are on my spirit team. I'm guiding myself. I'm using the archetype of a dragon to free myself. I am realizing the power that I hold. That inner fire I always talked about. That unrelenting force. That beastly nature, just like in Beauty and the Beast. Just like werewolves, that animalistic nature that has been used against me to make me look scary and dangerous when all I ever wanted was to help myself and everyone else finally be happy with themselves and the people around them. That's why I've always loved the dragons in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, because the power that we hold is bigger than we think, but only if we let it grow and beat our wings together as one, creating that winds of change feeling, which reminds me of another book I'm writing, but that's beside the point right now. We used to be that way, but I believe something happened during the Reagan era, and suddenly things started to change dramatically from there. What exactly triggered it, I'm not sure. But the point is that we've gotten to a point that it's now starting to make us implode on ourselves. And in order to save it, we have to save ourselves and our neighbors, ourselves and our families, ourselves and our country. I'm trying to weave the threads that have been separated and create a strong braid, similar to what Elphaba's hair is represented as in the beginning. She has her hair neatly braided to one side. That's why I've been getting messages from Spirit about the word itself, braids, because it was central to what Spirit was asking me to do. Share my perspective and what I see in movies and why I love them so much and want to be a part of the industry one day, but not as it is currently. That's why I think that Earth is really just a school of learning how to remember again, how to remember that we are all one. We are all important in our own ways. We might not see it, but we have to trust that people are inherently important to the well-being of other people in their lives, and as a lesson on what happens when we let ourselves misunderstand each other based on fear. There's multiple ways to get there, though. You could use imagination and solve problems by creating new realities through story, or you can master your emotions and learn how to regulate and channel and transform emotions into strength, which is what I've been doing. You can also trust the unseen and walk by inner knowing. And lastly, you can also use your logic/rationality. Some people expand by questioning, calculating, and testing. But on all levels, you need to do some form of all of these. Not all of it at once, of course, but just here and there depending on the situation if you want to get technical. But just looking at your favorite stories and picking the story apart will show you what you've always known on some level or another about yourself and in turn the world. That's why beliefs differ. They are different radios. They are all tuning into a similar frequency. Everyone has a different receiver though, so that's why there's no single way to describe reality. That's why philosophies, religions, and sciences differ so much. They are all trying to answer the same question: how does life work? All of these things overlap through story and emotions. That's why tarot is a thing. Wands are equal to creativity, ingenuity, and art. Cups are emotions, swords are tests or logic and rigor, and pentacles are embodiment in the physical. That's why the magician is a thing. He has all of those. That's why it feels like magic or witchcraft. We've forgotten what it means to live life fully and unapologetically. We have to be like little kids to understand all of this. You have to understand things and ask yourself those 1,000 questions in order to really get it, in order to wade through the river of emotions to get to stability. Stability is not land, but water. That's why most of the earth is covered in water and not land. It is a physical manifestation of what we must do in order to find peace in the world on an individual and societal level. You have to be willing to ask yourself when you don't understand something, what does this mean? Or what does this mean symbolically, and how does that help me specifically? That kind of thing. You have to stay playful, you have to stay aware, and you have to stay connected by asking if you need help. That's why that scene is so pivotal to understanding this, because Dr. Dillamond was teaching history. It shows that systems built on division will do anything to make sure that you don't focus on the past, because that's how we learn. When we don't see the value in something, we dismiss it without question. That is why only you can be the hero of your story. No one can make you do anything unless they have control over your emotions. When you treat your life like a movie, in a way, and within reason, you see the patterns. That's why the rebels in my book series use the sigil of a tree that is still connected at the root and branch level, because we are still connected to each other no matter what state the system might be in. The trunk is smashed, but the branches and roots, the past and future, or the people, are connected no matter what because of our shared experiences of living life. All the ways that we are told that we are getting out of control or being too much, all for control over us. That doesn't mean that we don't need a system in place, but that we need a better system than what we've been taught to believe was a good thing, that benefited us all when it really doesn't. That is why Spirit showed me the scene from Interstellar where Cooper is trying to dock when Matt Damon's character blows up part of their docking station. The weight of what that means is hanging in the balance of everything we hold dear. Disney's Hercules, the Percy Jackson series, and Interstellar shows a multi-layered way to explain synchronicity and initiation. We find out that life is more than what we've been told to believe, and that you find power in helping those around you because you have the power to do it. That's the hero's journey. Specifically, the docking scene shows how I would describe syncing up to this moment in my own journey. When you get down to it, it's like being in the mindset of Kronk from Emperor's New Groove and realizing that there's a really simple explanation here. So why is all of this drama going on when the real answer is right there? He consults with his inner moral compass, aka shoulder angel and devil, and asks questions about it and acts on those feelings. Like when he saves Cusco from falling down the waterfall that he put him in. Use whatever you can to learn more about yourself, because the more you understand yourself, the more you help yourself and other people, even if you haven't physically helped someone in some way. If you think about it, we let a handful of people decide what is and isn't good and let us collectively drown because they care more about money than people, which is what I talked about a little bit in my first Spirited Away video. When you conserve your energy, it allows you to finally invest in more creativity and connection and joy. It also allows you more time to think. When you relax and think, you're not focused on survival. You're focused more on what makes you happy. You radiate stability, which inspires others to shift too, which is why you want to go on vacation all the time. In my opinion, but I digress. This is basically me saying that they don't control us, and I can prove it. They are just souls that forgot what it meant to live and have gone so far down the survival rabbit hole that they care more about money than other people because they have equated money with safety. not people. Money is a tool. But when distorted, becomes destructive, just like anything else that's used in a perspective that is distorted. And with systems that rely more on money than people, you have to withhold the tool that they're using when you realize which one it is. And to do that, I propose that we go on a week strike of not buying anything and not paying anything. No bills, no restaurants, or anything. Just living for a week and see how fast this shit crumbles and how fast that people in power, decide to correct themselves or blame someone else. We've been in a 50-year or so karmic cycle ever since Reagan, in my opinion. Every president since has continued, softened, or reacted against those same frameworks. It's why many of the root problems like income inequality, healthcare struggles, student debt, and political polarization can be traced back to that starting point. It's basically a Saturn return of sorts for a collective system. Saturn cycles bring reckoning, accountability, and restructuring, so it makes sense that it also lines up with the 250-year mark of our country. This is our personal Ragnarok, as I use in my book. It's simply the end of an era and the start of another, one of peace and asking the right questions and making sure that we never fall into that trap again. So, what will you do now that you know? Which, coincidentally, is something I say at the end of my book series. At the end of book 3, which I haven't written yet, but I will. What will you do now that you know how to stop this? Nothing or something? The choice has always been yours. I'm only here to show you the way out, but it's up to you if you take it. Now, with that being said, keep your minds and your hearts open. Peace.